Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Just giving it another minute or two for everyone to come in to the webinar and get connected to audio, and we'll get started in just 1 second. Great to see everyone, and thanks for joining us. All right. Again, I just want to extend a warm welcome to everyone for joining us this afternoon. I'm Susan Anderson. I'm the Senior Director with Enterprise for our Rural and Native American programs. And for those of you that may not know about Enterprise, we're a national nonprofit working on affordable housing and community development, and working at the policy level, the federal policy level on issues as relevant to affordable housing and community development. We also do low-income housing tax credit and new market tax credits. And we are a CDFI and loan fund. But the piece that myself and my colleague Dustin Baird work on is on our solution side, and that's working with our partners on the ground to innovate and implement solutions. And again, we're on our Rural and Native American program, and Native homeownership is a big piece of the work that we do. And so it's just been a real pleasure, honor, and privilege to be supporters and partners of the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition, and really excited to be bringing their Pathways Toolkit to you all to share a little bit about the work that they've undergone over the last several years. And from Enterprise's perspective, I know as a national nonprofit, but working with our partners on the ground, it's great to be able to see work at a very local level, but then also be able to look from a national purview and understand where there's best practices and innovation to raise up and elevate. And that's part of our excitement at Enterprise about the work that's been going on in South Dakota. Not necessarily from the perspective that the exact work that the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition has undertaken should be replicated exactly in every region or state, but rather that there's a lot of great work that's been done, and how can these lessons and best practices be shared with others that are looking to advance homeownership opportunities in Native communities in their region. You know, oftentimes when there's a big task or a big undertaking, it really helps to know that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, and just sort of see what's been done in other communities and what might work in your own community. And that's really, I think, the benefit that's here with the Pathways Toolkit that the coalition has made available for folks, is just to see where they have had great inroads and what's been successful, and where other states and regions can think about what might work in their own communities. So it's a real pleasure to be a partner with the coalition in this work and on this toolkit. And with that, just want to ask all the participants if you want to go ahead and chat a little bit about yourselves in terms of you know, your name and your organization in the chat, or where you're located. And then also would love for our panelists today, if you want to come on and introduce yourselves, just let folks know on the line you know, your name, your organization, and your role in the coalition. And so I'm going to call on Tani to introduce herself first, and then Tani, when you're done, if you wouldn't mind passing it to a fellow panelist.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and we're happy to be introducing this toolkit that has been a while in the works and to highlight the work of our coalition. So I'm Tawny Brunch. I'm the Executive Director of Dakota Funds and also the Chairman of Dakota Federal Credit Union, both of which are located in the center of the geographic center of the Pine Ridge Reservation. And I'll pass it on to Jewel.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jewel Burnett. I'm the branch manager here in our Sioux Falls, South Dakota office for First Tribal Lending. We primarily focus on the HUD Section 184 Indian Home Loan Program across the nation. Thanks for joining and welcome. I'll pass it on to Sharon.
Thanks, Jewel. Good afternoon and welcome to our presentation on the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition. I'm Sharon Vogel. I'm the Executive Director of the Cheyenne River Housing Authority. We are the tribal housing entity for our tribal government, the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe. The role that I play with the coalition is I'm a member of the executive committee and I'm also co-chair of the policy committee. I will pass this to Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Moen. I am the Chief Operating Officer from Grow, South Dakota. And my role with the coalition has been rewarding. And I am on the executive committee and the policy and sustainability committee. With that, I'll give it back to Susan or Leslie.
Thanks, Lori, and really appreciate all of the panelists coming on today to join in this webinar and share kind of what's in the toolkit and what the coalition has been undertaking over the last several years. And again, thank you to all of our participants for joining. And you can just go ahead and chat your name and organization and your location if you want to introduce yourselves as participants via chat. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Newman with Seven Sisters.
Thanks, Susan. Hi, everyone. I am Leslie Newman with Seven Sisters. Can you, let's see. Okay, just wanted to make sure everyone can hear. And we are really excited to be here this afternoon to tell you about the work of the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition and the toolkit that folks from the coalition have developed to help share their story. So the idea is that as the coalition has developed and undertaken different activities and put together different materials, different convenings, folks from other places have said, how are you doing this? How does this work? Can you share your story? So the idea is that with the support of Enterprise, we put together this toolkit to tell the story. It has different modules, and that's what we wanted to share this afternoon, was share the toolkit and share the story of the coalition. So we have these fabulous presenters to help tell the story. Each of them, as you'll hear, was there when the coalition met for the first time before it was even a coalition back in June of 2013, and has been really active in the coalition since then. So again, we're excited to tell you the story, to tell you what the coalition has done, and to tell you more about this toolkit that we put together. So in our slideshow, I think we'll look at the next slide, in our presentation, just that one, there basically are 10 tabs in the toolkit, 10 modules, each of them on a different focus, a different topic. And that's what we'll use to guide our conversation today. So we'll start by telling you how things were at the beginning, how things started, how the coalition was formed, and then we'll go through the different pieces, again, telling you the story. So that's kind of our layout for today. If there are questions, just let us know in the chat, and it would be great to take them as we go. And then we have some time for questions at the end as well. So that's how we'll be sort of doing today's conversation. Next slide, please. And in the toolkit, just to let you know, so we have two versions of the toolkit. We have an electronic version, which you all can access. And then we also have a hard copy binder, which looks like this. So folks can either purchase one or the other or both. The idea is that this is actually a sustainability strategy for the coalition. So that's why we developed something for purchase. But in the toolkit, you'll see in the narrative, in the text, questions to consider, processes to consider, lessons learned, and resources. So next slide, please. So as I said, we really wanted to start at the beginning. How did things start? So I'm gonna ask Tani to let us know, sort of tell us about that beginning and that first convening. And I think, as I said, every one of our presenters, our four presenters, Jewel, Lori, Sharon, and Tani, were at this meeting. In this photo, Sharon was there. I know, I don't see you in the picture, Sharon, but I know you were there because we met for the first time. So I just want to let you know Sharon was there too. So Tani, let us know again, why did this all happen?
Well, I mean, I think if all of us were honest, why were we there? Because Elsie Meeks told us to be there, right?
Okay.
Elsie Meeks, of course, who is famous, really needs no introduction. But Elsie, who is still the chairman of Lakota Fund's board and was instrumental in starting Lakota Funds, very familiar with the needs of Pine Ridge, whether it be around access to capital for business loans, housing, or whatever. I think at the time was the South Dakota, the state director of rural development. And so I think it was a little bit to do with the frustration, she maybe renewed frustration with her, the lack of 502 loans being closed in our Native communities, on our reservations in South Dakota, honestly. And so being very familiar with that though, having grown up on Pine Ridge myself, and gone off reservation and then came back home, had the opportunity to take this position at Lakota Funds, was faced with the challenge of finding housing. You know, that was in 2008. There are no realtors here. There are no properties where, you know, how you can drive down other non-native communities a lot of times, even if it's in a rural area, and see, you know, signs that say for sale, where there's a presence of a real estate agent, a realtor and stuff. We don't have that on Pine Ridge. Home ownership rates, in fact, in all of our reservations are about half of what they are across the whole state. I think it's 68% of the state's population have achieved home ownership, and it's something like 31 or 32% in our Native communities in South Dakota. So obviously a big need for home ownership. That in addition to the fact that we know what housing conditions are like on Pine Ridge specifically, houses are worn out from the inside out because we've got so many people living in them. And even though those are a lot of times those are rental units, coupled with the fact that there's no homes available for sale, increases the need for home ownership. So it's something that's been frustrating to work on as a CDFI, and seeing it as a big need in our Native communities. Very, very happy, for a good reason, to get together and start addressing that need.
Right, absolutely. And Sharon, can you jump into sort of what brought you to that meeting, and what were your thoughts leaving that when the meeting concluded? What were you thinking?
Well, you know, first of all, you know, the before the coalition, or before this meeting, if you were looking at, if you're a practitioner looking for resources to help families get into home ownership, there really wasn't anything out there. I mean, if you went out, you kind of had to go out on your own and try to make your connections. So when I seen the agenda for the meeting, it pulled all the parties together, and that's just what we needed. You know, we needed to gather everybody in one spot and start talking. So that was what motivated me was, just making those connections and start networking with the important players that had either resources or knowledge that, we needed. And then when I left the meeting, I was so impressed. I mean, I just thought, this is where I'm going to learn. And it really did help me put the missing pieces together, and just really felt that we were going to be able to make a difference if we continued our efforts together.
Right. I think the idea of working together and that momentum that we felt from that very first meeting was really, really important. Lori, what were your thoughts in that first meeting?
Well, we had Keem as part of the USDA rural development. We were the intermediary for the 502 packaging or the program. And so we brought in some of our other resources that we had available with Native communities. And when we were done with that, I mean, look at the group, look at the picture. We were smiling, we were happy and very inspired and excited. So I agree. It was a great way to connect and bring us all together on the same page.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Jewel, what about you? Sort of your thoughts on the meeting? What brought you to the meeting? What were you thinking?
Obviously, in my line of work, partnerships and relationships have done wonders for us, in the mortgage industry. So seeing the opportunity to attend something like this and seeing all the tribes all together in one spot, coming out of there, wanting to identify issues, talk about solutions and things like that was good to see. For once, we're usually always competing against each other for certain things, and it was nice to see everybody come together for one focus and trying to get more homes done in any country.
Right. So the positive focus and working together.
Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that was the beginning, giving folks a sense of that very first meeting back in June of 2013. And it was held at Pier at the Housing Development Authority. And again, every one of our presenters was there. We had a native CDFI, we had a TDHE, we had a non-native CDFI statewide, and we had Jewel with the 184, a private lender. So understanding barriers. So Jewel, can you tell us a little bit about that? What the thoughts were around barriers? How are barriers part of the conversation?
Well, and you talk about barriers in Indian country and housing, obviously, it's kind of been really the same things over and over again, and everybody's had different issues. No one deal is always the same. Everybody has a little bit different issues they go through. So the biggest barriers for me walking through the doors and what I've seen to that date is still things we talk about today that we're trying to overcome in different parts of the country. Obviously, we've made it a little better, and South Dakota has always been, a little better than the average across the board when it comes to service from the Bureau. But you got all kinds of barriers when you're trying to build a house on the reservation, between tribal politics, community politics, the Bureau. You got environmental issues. So there's all kinds of these barriers that I brought to the table that everybody else in the room was experienced at one point or another. So it was good to get those all laid out and then discussed and start talking about solutions there.
Right, absolutely. And I think what you mentioned, getting the barriers out there and really solutions to them, because I think often that's where the conversation ends, is the barriers. But part of the coalition's approach from the beginning has been, let's get them out there, let's identify those barriers, and then let's move on to the solutions. Would anyone else like to jump in there on the barriers? Okay. So I think, some of the barriers that were identified early on were, as you mentioned, the land issues, navigating land in terms of leasehold mortgages, home buyer readiness, the preparedness of folks to purchase homes. So the capacity of our home buyer practitioners. There was housing stock issues that Tani mentioned, infrastructure issues, policy issues. So really kind of getting them out there, that's what it's about. But then again, taking that next step and developing some solutions. So part of solutions, I think, were the committees that we developed. So the next slide. So Sharon, can you tell us a little bit about the committees that we developed to address some of the barriers?
Sure. One of the things that really drove the establishment of the committees was just the capacity building. You know, we really needed to build our capacity as coming from diverse backgrounds. You know, we knew that we had expertise that we needed to share and with each other, and we needed to gain knowledge. So we started off with 4 committees and then added another one. We had the Physical Issues Committee, and that committee there tackled and did a great job and are doing a great job of really addressing the land lease process. And so their goal was to streamline that process. They also wanted to strengthen the infrastructure development and increase the housing stock on Indian land. And they knew that that was going to have to start with some capacity contractors and bringing them to the table and giving them a voice. And so, you know, they've produced a lot of great products. The second was, of course, the coalition and member sustainability. And from the beginning, we knew that we had to look at building our stability and expanding our membership, and we needed to keep that diversity. And so here we are, you know, we're on a path of sustainability, and we have expanded the membership to where, you know, I think bringing on more lenders and bringing on native CDFIs just really opened up new possibilities for home buyers. And so that was really a great effort by that committee. The other committee is the Home Buyer Readiness Committee. And this particular committee, I think I've just really been impressed with the early work that they did and the products that they've produced, but their focus was really to develop strategies to help practitioners increase homebuyer readiness. We had TDHEs at the table that back then had no homebuyer readiness program or services at all. And through the efforts of the coalition, recognizing that, we started to bring in education to certify community people, staff of the TDHEs, as well as nonprofit organizations working in our communities. So to date, we have 47 certified homebuyer educators that are available and are providing those important homebuyer readiness services of providing classes, and now we've even evolved to where we do the virtual classes. So that committee just continues to, you know, meet the need and they're flexible to operate in this COVID environment. Then we had the newest committee that we established was the Native Veterans. As we started this, we had the tribal veteran service officers that knew about their loan product that was offered by the VA, and but they themselves, they had veterans that were reaching out trying to access this money. The veteran service officers weren't sure how to go about this, so they connected themselves with the coalition, and through their advocacy and just the need, the Native Veterans Committee was established. And their focus is to increase access to home ownership resources for Native American veterans. And it follows the other committees, but they're one committee that addresses the housing stock, the land issues, the homebuyer education, and subsidies. And it's all focused really on the veterans. The fifth committee that we have is the Policy Committee, and that's the committee that I co-chair. And our focus is to identify and address systemic policies that are, that really to address the impediments to Native home ownership. And this particular committee, the first chair was Bruce Jones of this committee, and he did a great job. He was the state director of USDA's housing services, rural housing services. So, you know, he started us off and just really brought great knowledge to the table. And then we expanded that. And right now we have JC Crawford as the other co-chair. And at that time, JC was the executive director at Assistant Housing Authority, and he was a former tribal chairman. And so we have done a lot of work thanks to our committee membership that, you know, keep and the executive committee that keep tasking us with some challenges. And then the other committee that we have is we have the executive committee, and the executive committee is a diverse representation of the different agencies. And they meet, we meet monthly and really provide the guidance to for the organization. So we're looking forward to, you know, hiring our executive director and being able to continue the work of the coalition. Lori, did you want to add anything to what I just said?
You did a fabulous job. Thank you, Sharon. So when we came in probably more on the funding and financing, which has evolved now into that coalition member and sustainability. And that's one of the great things about the coalition is it's flexible. It is not rigid. It doesn't have to stay. It moves and it grows with the needs of the coalition and the members and what they are seeing in their communities. We started out providing resources. And so if we could be the resource to provide training to the coalition members, we did RCDI grants. Those were just some of the things. So that's primarily why I was on the funding and financing. But I just can't say enough about how the coalition is flexible. It needs to be a living, moving structure. And with that, I'll pass that on to anybody else that would like to speak about the coalition and the committees.
Thanks, Lori. And thanks, Sharon, for giving us a sense of the committees, what they cover, how they work, and again, their flexibility and how they have evolved. So as Sharon mentioned, the Veterans Committee is our newest one that we formed, really seeing the need. So at the beginning, you know, 7 or 8 years ago, we didn't have a Veterans Committee, but we saw the need to have that specialized focus. And again, we had very focused funding and finance, and now that's evolved into the sustainability that we have now. So as Lori mentioned, really evolving and meeting the needs of the coalition. And I think that's really an underlying sort of approach. It's been really important is meeting the needs of coalition members, and those change over time. Certainly during COVID, we saw specialized needs that we work to address. So thanks for sharing about the committees. Tani, can you tell us a little bit about the overall structure of the coalition? And we know that that's also evolving and changing. So our next slide, please.
Right. So, I mean, I think it's critical, honestly, the way Sharon and Lori mentioned that the coalition be nimble, be flexible enough to meet the needs of the coalition organizations that are members, but also those organizations are serving their tribal members and those families. And as we know, that those needs are constantly changing. So it is important that we stay flexible. In that way, we don't have a board. We have an executive committee. And I think that's important. The executive committee meets once a month. But we don't necessarily, you know, have we don't have the bylaws and everything else that in some ways would restrict us, and especially as we're new and kind of just figuring it out. And so I think the executive committee structure has served its purpose, has worked well for us. And that too then goes along with the fact that we have just, you know, not having our own 501c3. The coalition is of course still an informal organization, although that will be changing soon as we pursue our own 501c3. it's worked well that Lakota Funds has been able to serve as the coalition's fiscal sponsor. We get to use Lakota Fund's long history in serving Native communities to help us, you know, apply for grants and get the funding that's necessary been necessary to keep this coalition going. And in some ways, then now the coalition, of course, has its own track record in many ways. So I feel like the timing is right, that we're ready for the next steps. Lakota Funds, of course, has also provided that support in grants management and doing that so that the coalition doesn't necessarily have to provide for any full-time staff yet, but that will be coming with the 501c3. So yeah, I think flexible, nimble, the ability to react and quickly meet the needs of not only our organizations who are members, but our families, our Native American veterans, for example, and those specific needs, form whatever committees we need, whether it's the ones that we started out with or not, to make sure that we're addressing the current issues, honestly, and really helping move homeownership forward.
Right, right. I think that makes a lot of sense, Tanya. And I think, as you said, having that alignment with the fiscal sponsor and the coalition, where the goals and the missions really are sort of complementary. Because I think if there was a fiscal, I mean, it's a real burden, I would say. It's a real lift for the sponsoring organization, and you have to be committed and really believe in the coalition, because otherwise I think it just seems like, oh, what is all this work? You know, so there has to be that alignment and belief in the mission. And then I think, as we'll talk about, and as you've mentioned, I think at the very beginning, people said, should we have a fiscal sponsor? Should we be a 501c3 at the very beginning, the very first few years? And people said, no, we're not ready. Let's focus on doing our work and developing a track record and building on the momentum that we have. And now we're at a different place, again, 8 years later, where it makes sense to really, to be sustainable. We're looking at that 501c3, hiring staff, as Sharon mentioned, being our own independent organization. So I think, again, that's evolving over time. So let's talk, so we talked about structure. Let's talk a little bit about the gatherings and trainings. I think those are a huge part of the work of the coalition. Lori, if you could start us off on, what are those about?
Well, I think this is the best part of it all. And through the gatherings and trainings, we all gain knowledge from experts and peers who could share their programs and stories, successes and challenges. We continue to look within and outside of our circle to find ways to create learning space as we all learn differently. We all absorb knowledge differently. So some of the trainings were classroom trainings, such as the place-based training of NeighborWorks for the USDA RD 502 packaging, or the homebuyer education utilizing the pathways training. The gatherings to me were just spectacular. I always came away with such a great sense of camaraderie. We were all there. We had a passion. We had a learning journey, I guess you could call it. But the gatherings provided unique opportunities for training, and it also then gave us a on-hand idea of what people were actually incorporating into their communities. Through the tours, we saw firsthand what could be replicated, as well as what could be building our own communities in a stronger way, stronger relationships between each other. And the gatherings and trainings evolved into what I felt were stronger foundations, not just between our peoples, but between our organization. And it evolved to try new things and find solutions and use ideas that are already out there. Mm-hmm. And some of those included things that we'll talk about, like the innovative programming coming up here too. But I just thought this is probably one of the best parts that I felt we learned and gained our strength as a coalition.
Right. Right. The peer learning, getting to know each other, addressing issues together, and not recreating the wheel. Jewel, I know that you've been at really almost every gathering that we've had. What's your take on them, and how have you found them sort of valuable? I think this one is Yankton, if I'm not mistaken. The one that was probably closest to you, Jewel. Well, Sisseton maybe too.
They're all close to me, Leslie.
Close to your heart, right?
In Indian country, we're always 100 miles from somewhere. So yeah, the gatherings, I can't echo enough what Lori said. I think this is really where the rubber meets the road in all the hours that we spend on the phone, going over stuff. This is everybody's opportunity to see where all that work comes together, and the drives through the communities is what I really enjoyed, to kind of see some end products that the communities were working on, the successes that they had in each of those communities, and how unique and how similar some of them were, that how they were using same funding programs and what have you, and how the resource of the coalition helped them get to that point and have that success that we all could see in that community. So like I said, I agree 100% with Lori. This is by far my favorite part.
Absolutely. And Sharon, I know you've not only joined the visits, you hosted. I know back in 2016, we came to visit Cheyenne River, and I remember the thunderstorm myself, getting on that bus. But tell us about hosting. Tell us about what the trainings have meant for your staff.
Well, being a host was at that point was kind of exciting, because it was like gathering your friends again and being able to show them some of your hard work that resulted as a part of being having that developed our capacity to be able to apply for competitive funding, and to be able to have graduated people from our homebuyer classes. So we were able to bring some of the graduates and some of the new homebuyers to present before the group, as did other tribal site visits. So you really got to see the result of the hard work when you get to meet these young homebuyers that are starting out and just excited about owning their own home. But the capacity building of my staff has just really been critical to our efforts as a TDHE, because as a TDHE, you have to balance your housing development between rental stock and homeownership opportunities. So, and the coalition has helped us do both. So
Right.
It was really an honor to be able to have people come to our reservation and be able to see firsthand some of the successes that we've had, but also really to understand the challenges that still exist.
Right, absolutely. Again, really, really powerful. So the idea is that the coalition visits a different tribal community each year. That's been a bit on hold because of COVID, but we're certainly looking forward to the next one when we plan to visit Flandreau. But again, really, it's inspiring for the folks that come visit to see what the great work that's being done, as our presenters have mentioned. And it's also really validating, I think, for the hosts to have folks come and really learn about their work. I know, Tani, you've hosted now twice. So just really important part of our work. We also, the coalition has a planning day each year that's held in conjunction with the State Housing Conference. So the State Housing Conference is typically a Tuesday, Wednesday, and we have our own annual planning day the day before that. And what happens is that folks then stay and go to the conference, and we have our own track of Native homeownership workshops. So we try to look, our tribal site visits are really, we schedule them each June to celebrate National Homeownership Month. And then we try to also look at opportunities where our folks are gathering, like the State Housing Conference. So again, hearing about the gatherings and trainings, a huge part of the work of the coalition, and really looking for opportunities to make those happen. I think our folks have also mentioned the camaraderie. I think Lori and everyone's mentioned that camaraderie, and just really a cadre of folks that are working together, even in their own different communities for similar goals and outcomes. again, really, really powerful.
I'll just
So-
say, Leslie, if I can jump in there,
Sure.
that no matter what we learn, and all of that is important, we're learning from each other. I would say the single most powerful part about our gatherings and trainings is the relationship building. You know, the fact that we all have know each other very well, and how much more likely are we going to be to reach out to Jewel when we have a question about a HUD 184, or to Dakota Bank when we have a question about using a NAHI subsidy, or you know what I mean? It's just
Yes.
that has been super, super valuable, and it's been valuable to my staff too, and the different capacity building trainings as practitioners, where you form that relationship and you're not afraid to reach out and ask others how they're doing it, what's
Right.
working in their community, and chances are it's going to work in yours. But I'll also say how much I miss our annual planning day, our annual get together. 2021 people, I swear, right? No matter what. So
It's happening.
just because it's a way that we come together and celebrate too. I mean,
Right.
it's not just a planning for the next year or the next 3 or 5 years or whatever it is. It's a chance to get together, visit with each other, but to also celebrate the and it feels like that's been a lot. There's been a lot to celebrate lately. And so I can't wait for our next in-person planning day.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it looks like 2021 will be possible. Absolutely. So let's also talk a little bit about, I know Lori mentioned that, and Sharon mentioned the innovative programming. So I think that's also part of being responsive. Tell us about that, Tani.
So we have so much that we've just tried new. And I know Joanna is the one who refers to, you know, riding the bike while you're building it. This is kind of another example of being responsive to the needs of your community. And from that, really, we've had the chance to create a few innovative programs. One of it, which I think Sharon mentioned, it is a construction internship program. Physical Issues Committee took the lead on that, but we, of course, in knowing that we needed to address the lack of housing stock, the Physical Issues Committee contacted the local contractors and asked them what they would need to convince them to build more homes for our Native families. And they surprised us really by saying, we would love to build more homes for families. We would love to do that full time, and just find us some more experienced workforce. And so that was really what got us started with this construction internship program, where we are now we've done it for 4 years. I think we're starting our 5th year, Leslie, right?
Yep,
Yes.
we are.
And we started in 2 communities, Cheyenne River and Pine Ridge, with I think 10 interns each. But it's a program where we place trade students initially, but definitely youth who have some construction experience or are interested in pursuing that with our local contractors. We pay them, we're up to $12 per hour now for 10 weeks during the summer, 40 hours per week. So that's obviously beneficial to the local contractors who get to kind of test out some of the workforce, teach them, create the kind of worker that they need, employee that they need. It's also beneficial to the families that are needing more homes being built. And we've had many examples where those interns and contractors are in fact working on homes that I know Mazaska is financing, for one example, on Pine Ridge. So that's been one program. We also have launched others, the lump sum payment info sheet. And that was just basically, you know, us knowing, us being the Native CDFIs and others who are volunteering, doing things like VITA, the volunteer income tax assistance, while we're doing tax prep. We understand it's a great opportunity to share ideas with those families as they're being told that they get a $6,000 or $7,000 refund this year. Have you thought about putting that down, putting that towards a down payment on a home? Have you thought about home ownership? and then to be able to connect them to the other resources or programs or lenders that you know are part of the coalition to help them pursue that. But I will say also that it's the Native Homeownership Protection Program is a great example of hopefully that was only temporary programming, I'll say, but it was the coalition's response to the COVID pandemic and the needs that we were seeing in our communities for some assistance in those families who experienced, less income and were struggling to make their mortgage payments and or their business loan payments. And of course, that business would allow them to continue to make their mortgage payment. The coalition was responsive enough quickly to do some fundraising and get this program together. And I believe we assisted 70 some families, Leslie, with relief payments and to the tune of about $200,000. So that's a good example of innovative program and how we're able to act quickly to again meet the needs of our own communities.
Absolutely. Just again, meeting the needs and acting quickly, being responsive. I think we just see that as a theme all the way through. Absolutely. Thanks on that, Tanya, on the innovative program. Would anyone like to jump in on the innovative programming? So Sharon, tell us a little bit, let's look at the next slide. I know policy initiatives have been a really important part of the coalition's work as well. And as you said, you chair that committee, co-chair that committee. Tell us a little bit about the policy work.
Thank you. Well, we learned early on that policy work is absolutely necessary to advance our mission. And when you think about policy work, sometimes it can be intimidating. It can be a big unknown. And so a lot of times we acknowledge that it's important, but to implement good strategy commitment, and it takes knowledgeable people, good partners that make it happen. And we're so fortunate that we have experienced policymakers in Joanna Donahue and Leslie Newman. So that really jump-started our policy work. And so together they led us through, those earlier years of what do we do, how do we do this? But policy work is, for those of you that are wanting to replicate some of the successes of our coalition, be prepared to make this a priority also. Policy work is important because of the advocacy. You've got to be able to provide education, bring awareness, and share the successes. And through your policy work, and you actually, and we have seen it and can give testimony to it, that we actually are in a position, or find ourselves in a position of having built relationships and partnerships that we can actually bring recommendations to the policymakers or the decision makers that make a difference, that can change policy. I mean, literally change policy. And through the years, we now recognize that the opportunity to provide important testimony at different levels, being able to, again, provide that background of what the barriers are, provide recommendations, and just really advance our mission. But through good policy work, you create a strong voice for your membership, and you create a strong voice for the people that you serve. So don't shy away from policy work. We address policy work, I would say, at 4 different levels. One was the federal departments and agencies. With USDA rural housing, you need to learn more about the pilot that we had of Section 502 that provides home loans throughout the country, and yet we had a pilot project that was specific for Native CDFIs. And so when you have a chance, please go to our website and learn about those successes. With the VA, we began good work and on the Native American Direct Loan Program that produced good results for there's some policy work that you can create administrative changes. There's an opportunity that things can change administratively. And then of course, there's the harder work, but the necessary work to do the legislative policy work. We've worked with the Interior, with BIA specifically on the land leasing process, and also the housing improvement program, into where, you know, we were successful in getting dedicated down payment assistance subsidies for tribes that are receiving HIP funds, at least in South Dakota, that a tribe can designate a percentage of those HIP funds, and that's made a difference for down payment assistance and bringing that family to closing. And then through this, you will build a stronger and a relationship with your congressional leaders, your senators and your congressmen, and more importantly, their staff. And that happens through your DC visits. When they're in the home state, they'll reach out and want to come visit your project that you have going on, and so you can showcase to them the work of the coalition and how it's helped your own programs. Congressional leaders give you letters of support. They acknowledge you. We had Senator Thune that addressed a national conference, and he recognized the South Dakota Native Homeownership Coalition's work. And so that doesn't happen without the hard work that you put into it to establish relationships. And also through one of our senators, Senator Rounds, who sits on the Veterans Affairs Committee, he requested a GAO report on the VA Native American Direct Loan Program. And those reports are critical. They aren't easy to get, but in our case, this particular report is going to carry what we've been saying. We'll have a voice in the recommendations on how they can improve that program so more veterans can participate. The third level, of course, is with our tribal governments. We have 9 tribes in South Dakota. We've made presentations to them. We've encouraged them to get actively engaged in having the infrastructure to support mortgage loan lending within their courts, within their land policies. And so that, and then also worked with the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association, and they've provided us resolutions, and their voice is, and when you join forces with those strong voices of your tribal government leaders, it really helps your cause. Regionally, we've worked with the United Native American Housing Association. That's 33 TDHEs in regions 3 and 5. And nationally, we have had the support of the National American Indian Housing Council, getting resolutions from them, as well as NCAI, who have given us resolutions supporting our work and giving support to our recommendations. And then lastly, we have also started working with our state legislator, the legislative process, in starting our advocacy there, in providing written testimony, or just reaching out to our senators and our representatives in the House. And so the coalition is just starting to get its voice heard there. And all of this is really important work, and it just makes a difference in your efforts. It just gives you credibility. You build a positive reputation, and you're recognized as a reliable, dependable partner.
Thank you, Sharon. I think that was, again, really super, super important and interesting to hear about. Again, it also just shows that policy is central to the work of the coalition. We've heard about the training, we've heard about the gatherings, but this policy work really to make the changes that we need to see the home ownership increase. Thank you again, Sharon, for sort of outlining how that looks. One thing as we're sharing the work of the coalition, as folks are thinking about this and forming coalitions in the areas that you're working in, certainly want you to, think about what we're doing and could this spur you on, or could this sort of inspire you to start your own coalition or strengthen a coalition that you're already working with. And again, to make it look and to address the needs that you're seeing in your area, but the importance of that policy voice, I think, is really, really important. And I think how Sharon said, people are listening, and we have become a respected voice in advocating for the issues that we're talking about. And when a senator or a congressperson talks to the coalition, it's not just one entity or one person or one tribe. It's really a statewide voice, and that's why it's so important. I think what's also interesting is our four coalition representatives on our session today, Tawny, Sharon, Lori, and Jewel, are all on the policy committee. I mean, I think everyone really sees the importance of that, and really facilitated by, again, my colleague Joanna. So Sharon, you also mentioned the importance of data, and Tawny, if you can talk a little bit about that. I know it's not easy, but how that's been a part of the work of the coalition.
Yeah, and so I think it's a super, super important part, the data, to be able to describe the numbers, to be able to describe the success, the impact the coalition has had. I mean, it's frustrating, honestly, when for those of us that have been with the coalition from the beginning, and it feels like, we're doing a lot of work and we're making a lot of progress, but you can't just say that. You can't say that you feel like you're making progress. You need numbers to describe. And so we're getting there. It's been a hard nut to crack. I'm going to say there's been many, many challenges in the data collection piece. I mean, I would say just because everybody's organization is super busy normally, as practitioners and kind of in the trenches and stuff, but also the fact that many times we're reporting to many different in many different formats to many different funders already, and to be able to have the coalition out there and ask for more data too. I feel like we're on the edge of getting that figured out, where we're streamlining some of the data collection issues that have prevented us from being really good at it, having good solid numbers to work with to describe that success. I feel like we're getting that figured out. I also think the organization, the coalition members are understanding the benefit of it. I mean, just like Sharon was talking about the policy work, how can we do the policy work without the numbers to describe both the problems, but also the fact that we have solutions? So we need the data to be able to do the policy work. We need the numbers to describe to the funders of the coalition. Those are supporting us, either the foundation or the grant support. We need numbers to describe the work that we're doing. Data collection is critical for that. But I think many of us on the coalition are also, either on advisory councils or committees at different levels, whether they're, federal agencies, Federal Home Loan Bank, for example. I've been on the advisory council for many years. Federal Reserve Bank now is looking to me to share the coalition's numbers to describe for them the issues in Indian country around home ownership, but with the issues, also the potential solutions. And so that's huge. It's all tied together, but it is all tied very closely to that data collection. And so that's a part I feel like we're still getting figured out, but we're very, very close.
Right. And again, just the importance of that piece as well. And I think working to develop some instruments that everyone can use to report on data, so we can get kind of the aggregate for our coalition partners. really important. So let's talk a little bit about, we started our conversation talking about sort of how did things look at the beginning. So a successful future, where is the coalition going? And Jewel, if you can give us your thoughts on sort of what does the future look like, as much as we have a crystal ball.
Trying to get myself off mute. It takes 3 clicks, I guess, to get off mute. Well, the coalition, from where it started to, I guess, where it's at today and where it's going, I can think of one word that comes to mind. It's structure. It seems that we gain more structure every year. Things are more developed. We obviously, like we talked about, we meet on the phone, we meet in person for planning, and we kind of identify our goals for the year and work on it from there. But like mentioning hiring the executive director, 7 sisters, without the help of Joanna, Leslie, and that group, we wouldn't have been able to do this without their help. So that was key to it. So it's just time to move this on to a whole nother level, the group believes. And I think it's only going to get better and better as things progress and that structure is more developed. Right. Absolutely. Thank you, Jewel. Lori, anything as you think about the future?
I just think of enlarging our circle. We're getting bigger, we're getting more specific and doing it well. And yet knowing that it's okay to bounce back or change direction. I look at it as strengthening our relationships are getting stronger. We're making more links. We're having more connections. And those are always great. I look at more options for peer-to-peer sharing. Down the road, how can we then, not just in South Dakota, but in the United States, expand our knowledge and our collaboration together so that people can understand. Sometimes it's just a simple conversation is how it begins. And having the vision and success that we've had here has been wonderful.
Right.
One more thing, Leslie, I guess something I mentioned on a previous call is analogy I put was, I thought the coalition was kind of the sun in our solar system, and the tribes kind of revolved around our sun, and we really depended on the coalition to lead the way. So I kind of had that analogy in one of the last calls. And so.
Yeah, no, I think that's really powerful. So this sort of central entity that we all have our own orbits, our different tribes and organizations and entities, but we all sort of come back to that sun. So I think that's really powerful. So thank you for sharing that, Jewel. Sharon, when you think about the future, are there things that come to mind for you and the coalition?
I think that we all have hardworking families that, deserve homeownership and can afford homeownership with all the resources that we've identified and pulled together for them. And so I just think about our future of being able to increase the number of families that are going to own their own home, which is why we all started down this path.
Right.
And so I hope that, our future also is replicated in other tribal communities, that their hardworking families can also achieve their homeownership goals. So, and how do we get there? I think that, we just keep doing what we're doing and just building upon the successes that we've had, and just keep learning and sharing with new partners.
Right. Keep doing what we're doing. Right. And that vision is very, very clear. Tani, what about when you think of a future, what comes to mind?
Well, the sky's the limit, but I got to tell you, I am most excited about dedicated staff. I mean,
yes.
Really. I mean, definitely, we can't say it enough. Thank you to 7 Sisters. And it is honestly, at least 3 of you working on coalition activities with us for these last several years has been the reason that we're here, honestly. But to think that we're going to have, even 2 dedicated staff here, as we pursue this 501c3, at least one executive director, and then hopefully it will be soon another support staff person working on it full time, fully dedicated to it. It'll make a huge difference, honestly, because this is, it's rewarding work. And I think any of us, involved with the committees and stuff would love to be able to clone ourselves and do that work full time too, because it is that rewarding.
Right.
I feel like we're working on really good solutions, but it is a lot of work. And so I am very excited to think that is going to be, at least one person's full-time job. So yeah, very excited for the future.
And it's interesting. I think everyone is excited about the future, and yet has a different message. So that's what the coalition is also all about. You have your positions, you have the other organizations that you work with, but you're all really united in your commitment, I think, to the coalition. So I think that's, again, really, really powerful. The next slide and the last piece of the toolkit is resources. So what we've done is we've shared some of the resources that we've put together. We've mentioned leasehold flow charts. We've mentioned housing needs assessments, the lump sum payments, different info sheets. And so that's, again, a part of the toolkit that folks who access the toolkit can access those resources and tweak them and tailor them to your own situations. I did just want to ask our folks, if you had to pick a resource, and you don't have to, but if you picked one resource that you would, that you find the most valuable, what would that be? Lori, let's start with you.
When I was thinking about that, one of the primary things that helped me was the leasehold process flowcharts, just to understand that whole system of A to B. And I would reiterate that then I could, going back to that relationship building, go to a coalition member and say, okay, who do I need to contact in this organization? Who's the entity? How do I do this? And you have that relationship. And I was going to say earlier too, one of the things that I thought about was just leadership. In our world, our leadership is changing, constantly changing, or staff are changing, so that education piece is continual all the time. And so this toolkit helps us to go from A to B, just like the flow chart, A to B, and have a streamlined process of how to educate those that are coming new within our circle. So
Right. No, I think what you mentioned about the leasehold, and it's both the resources and the relationship, right? We don't have one without the other. But I know with the leasehold flowcharts, we thought it would be really helpful to sort of map out, well, what is the process like to obtain a leasehold? And we said, well, we'll just do one, that will be really helpful for all of our partners. And then we started digging in and realizing that it actually looked very different for each of our the 9 tribes in South Dakota. So we ended up with 9 flowcharts. And that was a learning. We started out with one vision, and then it really evolved. Sharon, would you have a resource that you would point out or find most valuable?
Well, I was thinking it was a toss-up between capacity building and getting my staff certified, or the housing needs assessments. And fortunately for us, we participated in the first housing needs assessment project that allowed us to take a housing needs survey out to our families. And the focus was primarily on homeownership. We wanted to find out how many families were really thinking about homeownership and what were some of the things that were associated with that. And that became really valuable for us because, one, it made us realize that a lot of our families really didn't understand the mortgage loan process, and that the home buyer readiness was going to be real critical in how we approach that. So we developed our outreach services and our home buyer readiness services. Really, the assessment report guided us in doing that. And then we also participated in a second one, and it was directed at veterans. And that was after we established the Veterans Committee. We knew that we really didn't understand what the housing needs were of our veterans. So that allowed us to, again, to really have a targeted population and ask them specific questions so we could make sure that we were meeting their needs and understood what their preferences were. So the housing needs assessment was a really valuable resource along with a lot of others.
Right, right. Okay, terrific. Thanks. Jewel, is there something, you know, in terms of the resources, what would you point to? Or all they are, or would you recommend all of them?
Well, obviously they're all really good, right? I mean, it's hard to pick from them, but I don't know if anybody's ever heard me talk. I've said this till I'm blue in the face, and I'll probably say it till I'm exiting this work when I retire, but Sharon touched on it. I think education is truly the key. I didn't play so well in a sandbox in my earlier years when lenders would call me to ask me, you know, for my grandmother's secret fry bread recipe, how do we do these deals on trust land? I wasn't always really willing to share, but obviously this is way bigger than me. I think it's way bigger than anybody on the call. It's important that we try and find ways to get our Indian people into homes, more homes across the country, especially on our reservations. So I learned to play well in a sandbox. The coalition helped me with that. So the flow chart is great, but the education piece, the homebuyer education counseling piece is huge in my mind. If you have a counselor on site that works with in your housing staff or at the tribal level or what have you, if you can find good people that do that, those people are worth their weight in gold. So that was the stickler for me.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're playing a lot better in the sandbox, Jewel. Tani, what would you say? Any favorite resource?
You know, obviously they're all valuable, and I hate to sound like a broken record, but the flow chart, honestly, as simple as it sounds, I don't know that there was another flow chart. I never saw anybody else who had outlined the steps, both to acquire a land lease and or describing the leasehold mortgage process. Mm-hmm. I think we were the first. And I'm sad to say that that's why it took Pine Ridge so long. I think we were the last ones to get ours done. But I've used that so many times, honestly, in visiting with especially the bankers who are maybe on the outskirts of a reservation community. You know what I mean? Because to be honest, they never understood the process or what that was. Were maybe afraid to ask. And so, you know, first of all, having that relationship, but then having an easy to access link to a tool, you can just email them, and then being available to answer questions or whatever, that's huge. And that's what it's going to take, you know, more of as the coalition gets bigger and more people are aware of the work that we're doing, and more families are striving towards considering even home ownership. We're going to need more of those folks at the table and more of those relationships. So yeah, it is all about education. Right. And the coalition has the tools that makes the education piece easier.
Right, right. So we did a lot of the resources that we put together are written, are text-based, the reports and the flow charts. And you can find some of these resources on the coalition's website. We also certainly want to encourage folks to purchase our toolkit, which also has links to the resources. But we also wanted to share, just take a few minutes this afternoon, about 2 minutes, and share one of the resources that the coalition put together is actually a series of videos. So we're going to share one of those real quick, just to give you a sense. We have the sense sometimes that part of the conversation is that folks don't even know that home ownership is possible. It's not even on people's radar. So we said, let's talk to coalition clients of member organizations and people that have become homeowners to really show that it's possible. So we have our Native Homeownership is Possible video series, and we're just going to show you one of the again, it's a 2.5 minute video. So Liz is going to show that.
I've always just wanted a house ever since I was a kid, because we didn't really grow up having homes. You just rent these little places and they never feel like home, and they're small and they don't really have anything of you in them, so I've always wanted a home.
You have to just kind of make up your mind that if you want to be a homeowner, then you have to make some sacrifices and long commitments.
At first, I was a little intimidated, you know, just because it's my first time of getting out there and whatnot, but I kind of got over the fear and decided to take it in my own hands and just do what I can to provide for my family. I grew up kind of in a struggle, I guess. No bedrooms, no running water, so we kind of grew up tough, and that's kind of, you know, made me who I am today.
You know, I was 28 years old. I didn't know what owning a home was like, really. I just wanted a quiet neighborhood to move into to raise children. And we need a place that they could call home.
We're raising a little guy who's 3 years old. Our little girl is 10. They're going to inherit the land. They're going to inherit whatever we build out here. So it's going to be here for them.
It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, very big living room and kitchen. It's pretty big for us.
We have a 1957 old house. It's like ranch style. It's really nice. And it's in Timberlake, South Dakota. It's on 2 lots, 1,800 square feet. Beautiful yard, nice big garage in the background.
The advantage of it is I got a place to call home.
So you get to make improvements on it, and you get to have guests over and not worry about things breaking down.
Yeah, it's ours, and we can do whatever we want to with it. If we want an addition, we can have an addition.
You can save up and plan ahead a little bit better than what you could do in a renting situation. For a 1-bedroom apartment, I was paying $600, and then you still have to pay utilities on top of that, and I didn't own it. When I'm paying now on my house, $700 a month, including property taxes and insurance and things like that. So it's such a better deal to know that you're investing in something versus just kind of throwing your money into something else that you will never own.
In the end, it's a long process, but it's worth it. Rewarding, and you have your own home for your family.
But deep down, I still feel great because we own a home.
Just go for it. Be courageous.
You're going to end up loving it once you get your own home.
It's worth it. Just go in and see what options are available to you.
So I've seen that a lot of times, and I love it every single time. It's one of 4 very brief videos that we have. And again, it's families, native homeownership or homeowners in South Dakota telling their story and showing that it's possible. So that's, again, another resource. The coalition saw this need. They needed to sort of share that message and develop these videos. So we wanted to see if you all have any questions. We also wanted to just tell you, if you do want to buy the toolkit, how that works. So Liz, if you can help us with that slide, that would be great too. Then we'll take questions and start wrapping up. Let's see. Here we go. So we have 3 options. Our basic electronic version is $500. And then we have option 2, which is in our electronic and a hard copy, which is $200. I'm sorry, $600. And then option 3, which is 5 hard copies, because we assume that everybody who wants the toolkit will be sharing it with your coalition partners, would be $500. So those are our 3 options. And then you can go to this link, which we will put in the chat as well, SDNHC That's our coalition website, toolkit. And you'll be able to click on that. Liz, can you show us how that looks? We're just going to navigate there really quickly to show you how that looks. So that's what you'll get to on the website. You'll see the different options. And then if we wanted to purchase the deluxe or any option, you just click on that. And then you add it to your cart. Then you'll go through and you'll do the, looks like Liz wants to buy 2 of those. And then you'll proceed to checkout. And then you'll do a checkout form and then pay for the toolkit, and then that will go to you. If you are buying the electronic version, you'll get an access code. So you'll be able to go online and access it with this code. So if you purchase only the hard copies, then we'll send those to you in the mail. If you purchase the electronic alone or electronic and hard copies, you'll get kind of, again, the password and the access information to access online. So Susan, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I also wanted to share with folks that if you are interested in seed funding for a coalition in your state or region, or accessing this toolkit, I'm going to have Dustin put his email in the chat. So please reach out to Dustin if you're interested in some potential support to do a startup for a state or regional coalition on Native homeownership. Love to have a call with you and see how we can become a partner in expanding even more homeownership opportunities in Native communities. So that's my plug.
Terrific. Thank you, Susan. Again, thank you for not just that plug, but for all of your support for the South Dakota Coalition. And I think, you know, we have different funders and different partners, but Enterprise really from the beginning has really sort of gotten it. Like they really get what we're trying to do, and not just for families in South Dakota, but how this hopefully can be a model for other colleagues and partners around the country. So let's see if there are any questions in the, let's see, how many families has your coalition helped achieve home ownership? So that's a big data question. I'm going to see, Tawny, how would we answer that? Let's see, the website. Kelsey says the website, and website does have some numbers on there in terms of dollars and homeowners.
And I'll say that I do know a dollar amount for, it looked like the end of 2020. I remember when we gathered mid-year last year, and I don't remember what the meeting was. I think it was our strategic planning, maybe, where we were midway through the year and had data through June or so. We were on track. I think it was for, was it $4 million in mortgages or home mortgage related products? And I believe we closed the year with 6 or 7 million. So, but still that represented an increase over the previous year. And I do have that report somewhere as far as the number of families.
And I think Kelsey also just posted in the chat. So that's really, Taryn, that's kind of an ongoing focus or ongoing goal, is just to keep collecting that data. And we certainly have seen the numbers of homeowners increase over time. We also saw, we didn't know what would happen under the pandemic, but we saw a sort of consistent and even increasing interest in home ownership. So that was something that we wanted to note as well. So that's a great question. Trust land, tribal home sites, fee land. We could definitely get you the breakdown. I think that's hard to do right off the bat, but we can certainly follow up with you. Our goal is really, we've seen that some of the home ownership over time that's been sort of promoted or made possible is on fee land because it's easier, right? But the goal of one of the goals of the coalition has been to make it work on trust land. That's where lots of the families that we're focusing on and working with and partnering with live. And so how can this work on trust land? That's the flow charts, and that's our conversations with BIA. So in some ways we know it's easier in town and on fee land, even on the reservation, but our goal is really to make it, to promote it and make it work on trust land. So what we'd like to do,
I think drilling down to the zip code, Leslie, would be a,
yes,
wish
true.
on the road, because obviously we have fee land on all our reservations, but if we drill it down to a zip code for the reservation for Pine Ridge or Rosebud, even if it's on fee land, it's a big deal to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So any other questions? Maybe a few easier questions?
There's one in the chat box.
There's one, okay. Who do I reach out for getting a training for lenders at my institution? So I think we could definitely have a follow-up conversation about that, because lender partners are key. And Johnny, you're in, are you in Montana?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we can definitely follow up. I would say to reach out to Joanna. Joanna and I sort of help to facilitate the coalition. And I know Joanna has your address, Johnny, so she'll be reaching out to you by the end of the day.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And again, you can always buy a toolkit. We are going to put a, just in the chat, we're going to put a quick poll just to get a sense of how many folks might be interested. And again, especially with the support of Enterprise to purchase it, it sounds like they could help make that happen. So I think we're good on our time. I really want to thank our presenters for sharing your insights, your experience. You can really hear their commitment and their belief in this coalition. And I think, again, 8 years ago, folks, we didn't know. We were just going to a meeting in Pierce, South Dakota in June of 2013. And I think the way that all of our presenters have described coming out of that meeting, something happened there where people said, we can work together to really make a difference and really increase homeownership for Native families in South Dakota. And then we did strategic planning, and then every year we've done more activities. But I think what we've seen is every time we have a meeting, there are new folks, but there are also folks that have been there from the beginning. So we have both. We have the expansion and the growth, and we have real commitment and stability at the same time. So I think that's why we're so excited about sharing this as a model. We know that it will look different everywhere else, but if there are ways that other folks can learn from the lessons that we've learned, I don't want to say the mistakes, but the lessons, that's what we really want to share. So we're excited to keep talking to folks about this. You can tell that I think all of us can keep talking and talking. Certainly I can. But I want to thank, again, our presenters for your time today, for all of your insights that you've shared. I want to thank our participants who joined us to hear more about the coalition. And again, feel free to look at the coalition website, to look at the toolkits, and to contact us for more information. And again, of course, thank you to Enterprise as well for all of your support. So thanks all.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.